Good morning, everyone, and happy November. With Financial Literacy Month in full swing, it's a great time to focus on building your financial confidence, reflect on your business's financial health, and plan ahead for the opportunities and challenges the new year will bring. My name is Paige Ross. I'm the Senior Manager of Entrepreneur Engagement here at ATB, and I'm excited to host today's session on Financial Pulse Check tool. I'm joining you from Okinstis, now known as Calgary and Treaty 7, and would love to know where you're joining us from today. So please add it to the chat so we can say hello. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Treaty 6, 7, and 8 nations of Alberta, and acknowledge Treaties 4 and 10. We acknowledge the ancestral territory of the Cree, the Dene, the Blackfoot, the Stoney Nakoda, the Saulteaux, the Ojibwe, the Tsuut'ina, and the homeland of the Métis people. We are grateful to work and live upon this territory together and for the means to learn from all the traditional peoples of these lands as we move forward together in reconciliation. As part of Financial Literacy Month, we're excited to offer today's Financial Pulse Check session, the first in our two-part series designed to help you take stock of where your business stands financially so you can set meaningful, achievable goals as we move towards 2025. It's inspiring to see so many of you joining us today. Thank you for that. You're ready to wrap up this year with intention and prepare for fresh opportunities. This is the right place for you to be today. I'm thrilled to introduce my colleague, Cliff Turner, our Entrepreneur Ecosystem Strategist at ATB Financial. With nearly 2 decades of experience in the small business landscape, Cliff has a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities entrepreneurs face. From founding his own ventures to working with small business advocacy groups, he is passionate about empowering Alberta's entrepreneurs with the insights and resources they need to thrive. Today, Cliff will walk us all through ATB's Financial Pulse Check tool, focusing on key financial indicators that will help you understand where your business is excelling and where there's room for growth. With Cliff's guidance, you'll learn how to evaluate your income statement, track accounts receivables and payments, and get a clear financial picture that sets you up for success as we move into 2025. Let's dive right in, and please join me in welcoming Cliff Turner.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Paige. Very happy to be here today and very excited to be presenting the Small Business Pulse Check tool that has been newly released at ATB. So this is a fairly new tool that's available on our Entrepreneur Center website. The first thing I'd like you to think about when it comes to the Small Business Pulse Check tool, eventually the slides will show up on the screen. There they are. First thing I'd like you to think about is basically, those little gadgets that you can wear on your wrist. I think the most common one is a Fitbit. There's more advanced ones out there. I don't really know the names of them, but what they do is they sit on your wrist and they kind of monitor you as you go out through your day. How many steps you're taking, what's your pulse like. Some of them can monitor blood pressure and heart rate and things like this. But they're a handy tool for those that want to keep on top of their health and know what's going on day to day as far as their body goes. Now, the idea is you can monitor all those things, and if everything's going hunky-dory, the Fitbit, I'll just call it, even though there's, like I say, more advanced ones out there, it sits there on your wrist and doesn't bug you, right? As long as things are going okay. But then as soon as something changes, if it varies in a way that could be a sign of something maybe going wrong in your body, it'll let you know. It'll tell you, you know what, there's something you need to pay attention to here. And that's when you know to look deeper. And maybe that means going to see your doctor. This is a specialist who can look at your symptoms and figure out, is this something to be worried about? If it is, what are some of the solutions? The Small Business Pulse Check tool is very much the same as one of these Fitbits. The idea of it is to be a simple and quick method to just give you a general sense of your business's health. Today, we're going to focus on one part of it, but there is three. There's the financial part that we're focused on today because it is Financial Literacy Month and we only have a certain amount of time. But there's also a strategic and operational part that if you check it out in the guide itself, which you'll find through that QR code, you'll see the instructions on how to use it. And you'll also be able to pull up the tool itself, which is a spreadsheet, and follow along today. The link for that will also appear in the chat. Lindsay will put that up so that everybody can access it through there. Now, when I say I'm excited to present this, I'm not exaggerating. I truly believe that this is an important tool for a certain type of business owner. And that's because I used to be this type of business owner. And that is the kind of person who's running a business, is very much in their business, doing the day-to-day operations, and maybe doesn't have the time to every month dig really deeply into their finances. So my experience was one of the businesses I owned was a roofing and siding company. And for the first 3 years, I was very much working in the business. You've probably all heard that cliche, you should be working more on your business than in your business, right? First 3 years for me was very much in my business. Every day that the weather permitted, I was on the roof, putting down shingles, fixing roofs, taking care of things like that. And by the end of the day, exhausted. 10 hours of walking on slopes with heavy bundles of shingles is rough on the body. And by the time you get home, you just want to sleep. So I didn't really want to be digging into my finances in the evenings. If there was rain or something like this, basically I'd be out trying to make sales. We couldn't be doing the roofing, but I had to go and get new customers. So I'd be spending the time doing that. And that would eat up my days. So very little time for working on the business. And I know now looking back that was a mistake not to create that time. I was forced to start looking at it though at one point because I'd been ignoring this pain that I had in my left foot for years. So I didn't have a Fitbit telling me I should go to the doctor for my left foot. I just bared with it. But one day in the middle of summer, of course, busy roofing season, it started to hurt too much. I just couldn't take it anymore, and I ended up seeing a doctor. They found some growths on my bones in that foot that needed to come out ASAP, according to them. So about a week later, I was having surgery. They removed a toe and a bone up inside the foot. I can't remember what that's called now, but they took these out and fixed up a couple other things in there. And I was left not being able to put any weight on it for a couple of weeks. And then even after that, not really having my balance. So I couldn't be on the roofs. But I knew this going into the surgery. So I was forced to go, how do I start working on my business so that it can continue to create revenue for me, even though I'm not going to be able to go up and physically do it? So as it forced me to do that, I started looking at how things have been in the past so I can build into the future. And I realized I'd really been letting it slide when it came to just knowing where my business was at. I was looking at my bank account, and if there was money in there, I thought I was doing good. If there was no money, maybe I better change something. But it wasn't very scientific. That is what this tool is for the people who are in that stage where they sort of out of necessity have to work in their business every day, don't have a lot of time to pay attention to working on the business, but still know the importance of keeping track of where their business is at. So we boiled it down to some key things that if you can just take a couple of hours every month, at the beginning of each month, grab a cup of coffee and just spend a couple hours looking at these things, you'll have a pretty good idea of where your business is at. And then if there is anything that starts to run out of where you'd like it to be, to go and talk to one of the experts that you have at your disposal. With the financial section, it's basically 6 numbers. That's what I like about this. If you can track these 6 numbers every month, you'll probably know pretty well where your business is at doing that pulse check. Now, the tool itself, it does make some assumptions about your business. Assumption 1 is that you have written goals and a vision for your business. This plays mostly into the strategic part of the pulse check tool, so we won't touch on it too much today. But I'd encourage you, if you don't have written goals or a vision for your business, be sure to get that done. Incredibly important. The second assumption is that you have bookkeeping software and you're keeping it up to date. So, whether it's daily or weekly, you're at least scanning your receipts in, having your expenses recorded in there, and having your income recorded as well. So at the end of every month, it's up to date on what happened throughout the month. The last assumption is that you have experts around you. For the financial section, most importantly, an accountant that you can call on if you have questions, or if things start to go off track a little bit, you have someone in your pocket as a part of your team that you can call on, and that you most likely have an annual meeting set up with them, probably around tax time. If you have all those in place, this tool will work very quickly for you. If you're missing any of those, you might want to address those right away. I think they're very important to a successful business. Now, to go through the tool today, we're going to use an example. And this is this fictional business I came up with, Diane's Dinette Sets. I know my business naming skills aren't the greatest, but whatever. Diane makes dinette sets, and she makes handmade ones. So very, very beautiful, heavy wood, nice sets that you'd be very proud to have your family come and sit around at Christmas or something like this. She operates out of her garage, so she doesn't have to worry about any lease payments or anything like this. And she's in her second year of business, so she's kind of getting into that initial phases of growth. Right now, she charges $5,000 for each set that she builds. And I know in the real world that would fluctuate all over the place depending on the set, but we're going to keep the math nice and simple today. So we're saying she charges $5,000 no matter what she builds for her customer. She has one part-time employee that comes in just to help out around the shop and run errands and this kind of thing. She pays that employee $2,000 a month. And then she subcontracts out part of building those tables. So she doesn't do upholstery work, but she has a friend who does. So any seats that need upholstery work, she sends out to that friend as subcontract work. She pays herself $4,000 a month as a salary, and she plans to take a dividend at the end of the year, if that's possible for her, depending on her profits. Now, she likes to keep her business simple. So she's got her customers responsible for delivery. So she doesn't have to think about, who do I get to deliver this? What's the price? How do I build that in? How do I charge the customer? She builds the tables and the customer organizes delivery for themselves. Running her business this way, she is basically sees a capacity of 5 sets per month at maximum. Now, doing 5 sets a month for her is maximum. She's running herself ragged at that point. She kind of prefers to do 4 a month because that still gives her a decent income, and she has a bit of time for herself. So this is the example we're going to be using today. Now, the first thing we're going to do is get her set up to input some numbers into the tool. So what she has to do is go and look at her profit and loss statement. Now, if you have your bookkeeping software set up, you should be able to find this quite easily. It'll just be into the reporting section, and you'll be able to give a range of dates to generate one of these statements. Typically, when we look at a profit and loss statement, you'll probably see an annual one. But because of this tool, wanting to check in on things on a regular basis, we're going to look at the monthly. Now, you might see it called a P&L statement, or P&L or a profit and loss statement, or an income statement is the other thing it might be called in your software. We're going to use profit and loss statement today, though. Now, in hers, we're going to visit some of the numbers that she's going to look at. So we'll get a pretty good sense of what she did in April. She had general revenues of $20,000. So at $5,000 per dinette set, that means she's done 4 this month, one of her kind of favorite months. Her cost of goods sold to create those tables was $8,000. Now, cost of goods sold, you might see this called by its acronym, which I might use as we go through this, which is COGS. You might actually hear it called direct costs or inputs as well. But you'll hear me using cost of goods sold or COGS today. And what these are, if you're not aware, maybe many of you probably are, is it's the material that actually goes into creating the product or the service that you're offering. So in Diane's case, it's the wood that she has to buy, it's the fasteners that she uses, and it's that upholstery work because she's subcontracting that out. So she only pays for that when she's actually building a table. So it's those direct costs of creating the thing that she's selling. So when she takes her revenue of $20,000 and subtracts the cost of goods sold of $8,000, she's left with $12,000 gross profit. So that means she's got a profit of $12,000 before she pays for the things that it takes to run the business. That's where the operating expenses come in. For this month for her, $7,500 in operating expenses. So she's got the salaries for her and her part-time employee. She doesn't have too much in this category because she works out of her garage, but she does have some insurance payments she has to make. She did take a loan from the bank to get a piece of equipment, so she's paying on that monthly, and she invests in marketing each month as well. So this month that totaled $7,500. When we subtract that from her gross profit, we get $4,500 that she's left with at the end of the month, which is pretty good considering that she's already paid herself under that salary tab. Now, the reason we're looking at this is all the numbers that she needs for the first part of the tool are on this statement. I've said before that there's 6 numbers you're going to need. We're going to work with 3 to begin with. The first one is revenue. So this is one that most business owners we kind of know this off the top of our head, right? We know how much revenue we did last month and the month before, and probably even the month before that, and we know what we're on track for this month. It's the easiest one to track because it's the amount of money that comes into the bank account, basically. Now, we're going to track that every month in the tool because it'll help us see how our business flows in a very general sense. We'll see the consistency of our business, and it'll also show seasonality. So once you've used this tool for half a year, 2 years, you'll really start to see some trends just with the revenue stream there. And we're going to track it as a straight out dollar amount. That's how we're going to look at it. So we're going to keep that very, very simple. The next number that we're going to look at is gross margin. So the reason we're going to look at gross margin is it's going to show us the value that we're getting from our costs of goods sold. So when Diane buys all that wood and fasteners and pays that upholstery person, how much value is she actually getting out of paying those expenses? It's basically a way to express gross profit as a percentage. The reason we're going to track this one as a percentage is kind of twofold. One is, as we track this, we want to try to get seasonality out of the equation as much as possible. We want to see, no matter how much is actually going on the revenue side, how much are we getting out of those inputs, just straight across the board. So that's one reason we're going to look at it as a percentage. The other is it's really handy to compare with industry norms. If you're comparing yourself to other businesses, they might be a lot smaller or a lot bigger than yours. So if you just compare revenue numbers and gross profit, it might be pretty hard to see, where you actually sit. But if you turn all that in percentages, it makes it much more like comparing apples to apples. Now, the formula for this is on the screen. You don't have to memorize this. You don't have to know it because the tool does this for you. That's the part of the beauty of this thing is you don't have to do much math. But just for knowledge sake, gross margin is basically taking your revenues, subtracting your costs of goods sold, and then dividing that by your revenues again. To make it a percentage, you just multiply it by 100, and then you have your number. And again, all that's really doing is expressing your gross profit as a percentage, and we call it gross margin. The third one that we're going to look at is net margin. So very similar to gross margin, just taking one step further. So this one shows more the efficiency of your business overall once all your expenses are taken into account. And like gross margin, net margin is basically just expressing your net profit as a percentage. And we track it as a percentage for those same 2 reasons, to try to get seasonality out of the equation as much as possible and make it possible to compare with industry norms with more accuracy. The formula for that, again, you don't have to memorize this, but just for knowledge sake, net margin is your revenue minus your costs of goods sold, same as before, but this time you subtract your operating expenses as well. Then divide by your overall revenue, multiply by 100, and you have that net margin. So all fun and dandy for now, right? Let's see how this works in practice with Diane. Like I said, this financial pulse check, you only need 6 numbers, and 3 of them are right here for this first half of the pulse check. Her revenue, her cost of goods sold, and her operating expenses. That's all she needs to find on her profit and loss statement. So if she knows where to find that in her software and she knows where to look on that report, that takes about 3 minutes to find. And then what she's going to do is she's going to pop it into the tool itself. So I'm hoping that you've hopped onto the tool and you have that up in front of you so you can compare to a blank one. I couldn't fit the whole tool onto one screen and have everybody able to see it. So these are kind of screenshots for just the sections we're going to look at. But this is Diane's example. So as you can see in month 4 there, all she's done is inputted her revenue, her cost of goods sold, and her operating expenses. So those exact same 3 numbers, just pulled them over to this tool. And what that's done is it's generated her gross margin and her net margin for her. So right away, what she can do before she goes even any further is compare that to industry norms. Just out of curiosity, I did a bit of research on industry norms for home furnishing manufacturing. And the typical gross margin for that industry is kind of in that 50 to 70% range. So she's right in the middle there at 60%. And the net margin norm for that industry falls anywhere between 15 and 35%. So again, she's in there, maybe a little lower than the middle. But she can look at those numbers and know, okay, what I'm doing is normal within the industry. It's not stellar, but I'm not behind everybody either. So it's probably a good feeling to be able to see that. Now, the nice thing about this tool, once those numbers are inputted, is it generates some graphs for you, which if you're anything like me, the visual is a little easier to understand and to predict from than just looking at numbers straight out. Now, this is her whole year. As you can see in April there, April. we have the same numbers there. She's got her $20,000 revenue, her 60% gross margin, and her 22% net margin. So on the right-hand side there, you see her gross margin in blue and her net margin in yellow. Now, as she looks at her whole year, she can start to see some things here. One is in June, things started to change for her. So let's be in real time with her. She's gone through January to June. Her revenue has been fairly steady at that point on the left-hand chart there. And her gross margin on the right-hand chart in blue has been very steady. She's been at 60% the whole way. And she's been improving her net margin. It was pretty rough in January. It recovered and came up into industry norms partway through the year. And in June, we see it starts to change. Her gross margins start to go down and her net margins start to go down. If she's tracking this, she'll be aware of it. If she's not tracking it, she may not be aware of it. But it is the beginning of a bit of a pattern for her here. And that pattern leads to this spot. And this is where I think a lot of entrepreneurs can fall into a bit of a trap. If you look at the left-hand chart with her revenue, it crawls up nice and healthily up to her maximum of $25,000 per month, doing 5 sets per month. So if all she's looking at is the balance in her bank account, like I was in those first few years of roofing, or she's just tracking what her revenue is, that might feel like some pretty good months. You know, I'm running full out, I'm making as much money as I possibly can here. If she's not tracking her gross and net margins, that might be the conclusion. It's been 3 great months. But if she's tracking these things, she'll also notice she might have made more money, but her margins have gone down. Something is unhealthy in her business because now she's getting less value out of the wood and fasteners that she's buying, and she's getting less value out of the expenses that she has for her business as well. So it puts a whole different spin on how she interprets that money that she's got as revenue. If she's been tracking things, starting in June, she'll start to notice that decline, and hopefully she'd catch on that she needs to adjust some things before she gets to these lower months and can correct it so she's getting the maximum value out of that revenue in those large months. We'll dig a bit more into some examples here because I like to, you know how Marvel does it, right? Like they've got alternate universes, so now there's, I don't even know, 7 or 8 Wolverines or something like this. We're going to do the same with Diane. This was the one that we're using as our main example, but we've got Diane in Parallel Universe 1 as well. In this one, she's had a bit of a different year. Her revenues have been growing quite steadily. And again, they get up to that $25,000 level. But she takes a pretty significant dip in her margins, even more significant after June than in that first example. So some things to notice here is she starts out in the negative. January was pretty rough for her. So she knows, looking at the chart on the left, $10,000 is revenue, even if her gross margins are high, blue line on the right-hand chart. That doesn't mean that she's going to profit. She's still in the negative for that month, so she knows she can't run at $10,000, definitely. June and July, again, she saw a dip here, even though when you look at her revenues, they're going up steadily. So she starts to ask herself, what's happened there? So just as an example, let's take the blue line, the gross margin on the right-hand chart. It was sitting right around that 60%. It actually went up. She got better value in June. So maybe she found a new supplier who offered her a 1-month sale if she switches over to them. She got a bunch of wood for her projects in June at a cheaper rate. and took advantage of that. So her gross margins went up. But then she learned in July and August that the regular prices of that supplier weren't exactly what she was expecting. So now she's paying more than she used to. So it's pulling those gross margins down. Looks like in August there, she maybe corrected that, went back to her old supplier and got her margins back up to where they should be. But if she's tracking this along the way, she'll be able to make that decision quicker. She runs into the same problem as that other one. In a month where she has her highest revenue of the year so far, $25,000 in August, her margins are at the lowest they've been, or almost the lowest they've been that year. So again, that same problem, if she's not tracking those margins, she might not know that she's getting less out of what she's investing in her business. One more parallel universe, Diane. This one, she's just kind of having a rough year. She has low revenue all the way through, but she's keeping her gross margin really healthy, but her net margin is kind of suffering. So the first thing she can see here is that, like we kind of discovered in Parallel Universe 1, Diane, if she's doing $10,000 a month, it's just not a sustainable business. She's either in the negative or barely in the positive with the net margins on the right-hand side there, even though she's keeping her gross margins intact. So that means she has to revisit how she's doing her business. She's getting the material at a good cost, so that's okay, but she needs to revisit what are her operating expenses. They're obviously too much for the amount that she's generating. She needs to cut some things out or get rid of some things that maybe she doesn't need. On the other end, she might want to revisit her pricing. Maybe she needs to be charging more than $5,000 per set to try to get that net margin up by raising her prices and cutting her expenses. And again, if she's tracking this early enough, she'll come to that conclusion nice and quick. Like in this example, January, February, and March should be showing her that. She shouldn't have to go through the whole year to learn that. And if she's using a tool like this, hopefully she can change that trajectory as she gets closer to the end of the year. And again, she falls into the same trap as all the other ones. I keep harping on this one because I think it's really important. She has her best month, this time $20,000. And at one of the lowest margins, she made zero profit that month. She basically broke even. So important to track these, see where the trajectories are going, and make changes early so that these traps don't come back to bite months later on. So let's go back and just look at her profits and loss statement again. All of those charts, all of those trajectories were generated just by tracking these three numbers diligently each month. And that's kind of the main thing about this tool. You have to use it diligently. If you skip months or just do it every 6 months, it's not going to be that valuable to you. But if you're willing to go in and find these numbers once a month, plug them into the tool and see where those lines go for you, you'll probably be able to see some trends developing quite quickly and make some decisions on how you're going to act with them. Now, yours are going to look very different than Diane's. Like I say, this was a very simple example. We didn't even put the amounts and the line items there, which you would normally find on your profit and loss statement. But the idea is get those three numbers, track them in the tool, and start looking for trends. Compare them to industry standards, see where you sit on that, and then know where you're comfortable running your business. And if any of those lines start to dip into a place that you don't feel comfortable or that you think might be a bad sign, call your doctor. The Fitbit's beeping. Call them up and say, hey, what does this mean? What do I have to do? Where's the problem? So that's the first part. That's the first three numbers of the 6. All right. And we're going to do some questions after this. So if you have some, pop them in the chat and we can go back and revisit some of those things if you like. But I'll run you through the second part of the tool before we get to that. The second part is just another 3 numbers. So these are fairly simple too. You should be able to find these on your balance sheet if you go into your bookkeeping software and go to that reporting stage. You should be able to find it on your balance sheet. And again, just look at it monthly, just like we did with the first part. The first thing we're going to look at here is your accounts payable. So basically, how much money do you have owing that needs to be paid this month? Basically the same as personal budgeting. You know how much your bills are going to be for the month, and you make sure that you have money to pay them. Same thing here. But the question you're going to ask in this one, once you know that number, is are you using the payment terms that are available to you as efficiently as possible? See, I know it's a good peace of mind when you get an invoice to just pay it right away. And that's what we want our customers to do, right? It feels good to do that yourself sometimes too. Then it's out of sight, out of mind, it's been paid, don't have to think about it again. But a lot of times you can use payment terms that are available to you to strengthen your own position. So an example of this might be, let's say Diane has a 60-day term with her wood supplier. So she takes delivery of the wood that she needs on the first day. Now she has 60 days before she has to pay that back, so that she has time to create the tables, sell the tables, generate that revenue, pay the bill. So it's a nice arrangement with her supplier. No interest for that 60 days, but if she goes over the 60, there's probably some fines and some interest to be paid on top, and as well as some awkward phone calls. But she's got that 60 days. Now she also has a credit card, and most credit cards have a bit of a grace period built in if you're paying your balance off every single month. If every month you get that bill, you pay it down to zero, you'll have typically a 21-day grace period in there. This is very true of ATB business cards, so definitely talk to one of our business advisors about that and how to leverage it. But the idea is she can use that grace period of 21 days with that 60 days from her supplier. So she picks up the wood, she doesn't have to pay for 60 days. So that money that she was going to pay for the wood, let's say it's $5,000, it stays in her possession, it stays in her account for that 60 days. Then on day 59, we'll say, just to be safe, she uses her credit card to pay the supplier. Now that credit card, if she's been paying it off every month, grants her that 21-day grace period. So that's 81 days that she has that money in her possession that she can use to leverage in her business. Now, what could you do in 81 days with $5,000 to improve your business? She might want to invest in a marketing campaign or something like this that she knows will turn a few more tables for her, and she'll just have more revenue at the end of that time, still be able to pay off that credit card in time. So think about those things when you're looking at your accounts payable. What's due? Do you have the money to pay it? But are you using it as efficiently as possible? The second number we're going to look at in this part of the tool is accounts receivable. So the opposite end of this. How much money is outstanding from your customers? How much do they owe you? Now, it seems kind of funny because we just talked about leveraging payment terms to your benefit when it comes to you owing other people money. And of course, other people are going to want to do the same when it comes to owing you money. So you need to be very clear with what your terms are and be comfortable with them. So know what your terms are and communicate them to your clients. If they have a 30 or 60-day term to pay it off, make sure that they understand exactly when that ends and exactly what the consequences are if they go over. Have that printed out on your invoice is the best way to go. That way there can't be questions about it. Have a follow-up system in place for this. Make sure that you're communicating with them so that they don't just forget that they owe you money, right? Those can sometimes be a little bit awkward, but it's just part of doing business. But if you have clear payment terms, it should be a fairly natural conversation if things go over. And then the one thing that I think a lot of business owners overlook with this one is just making it easy for customers to pay you. It's quite often I've run into businesses where, I've bought something through my roofing company, and it's basically been, I get an invoice through email. It's a PDF, right? So I pull it up on my screen and I go, oh yeah, I have to pay that. Now I have to figure out how to pay them. Do I want to send them an e-transfer? That means I have to go log into my bank account and set it up, get their email put in there, figure out a password if I need to. It's a few steps, right? So typically what happens is that gets shoved off on a to-do list somewhere. Or maybe it's I need to call them with my credit card number. And I don't have my wallet with me right now. I'll call them later. And then when I do finally remember to call, when I have my credit card handy, I get a voicemail because they weren't available to pick up the phone. And I don't want to leave my credit card number on a voicemail. So I hang up and try again a week later. It's difficult to pay if the system's not in place. The easiest way to do this is, again, with your bookkeeping software. It's probably capable of sending out invoices with a pay now button on it that'll connect to your bank account. The simplest way to collect your money quickly is to just make it easy for your customers to pay. Have that invoice where it pops up on their screen. They press the one button, they input their information. Now you're paid. Easy peasy, right? So think about those things with your accounts receivable. How much money is out there? Do you have a system to collect? And is it really easy for your customers to pay you? That can make life a lot easier and avoid a lot of uncomfortable phone calls. So that's 2 out of the 3 numbers that we're tracking in this part: accounts payable, accounts receivable for that month. And lastly, cash on hand. Pretty simple one again. How much money do you have just sitting in your bank account that isn't allocated for anything? But again, the question you're going to ask here is, am I using this money wisely? If you have $5,000 or $6,000 sitting in your checking account at the end of each month, that's probably a nice buffer. It's good to know that there's a bit of money sitting there to use in case of emergencies or something comes up or an opportunity you want to take advantage of. That's a great buffer to have. But if you've got $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 sitting in a checking account every month, you might want to start asking, am I using this effectively? Maybe it's better to put this into at least a high interest checking account or a high interest savings account. Maybe you want to roll it into some GICs so that you have one coming to term every 3 months or something. So you have access to a little bit of that all the time, but it's in there making money for you in these GICs. Lots of different ways that you could leverage that money. But ask yourself that question when you see how much money you have sitting at the end of the month. Are you using it wisely? So these three numbers, they also go into the tool. And in Diane's case, it looks like this. So if you have the tool open, this is just right below the section we were talking about before. And you can input these numbers monthly. So let's look at April again for Diane. She's got $2,000 in accounts payable. So she's got a couple of bills to pay. She's got accounts receivable of $2,500. And it looks like that's run over from March. So maybe a customer didn't pay half their bill in March and still hasn't paid in April. So she knows it's outstanding. And she has $8,000 in cash on hand sitting in her checking account. So all in all, that would feel pretty good, I think. That's not a bad position to be in at all. When she plugs these numbers in, again, just like the first part of the tool, the second part of the tool will plot this out on a graph. And that's where the stories can kind of come to life and conclusions can be made. So let's look at how her whole year goes here. So when we look back at April, like I say, she was in a pretty healthy position. You can see on the chart there in the green, she has some cash in the bank account. Her accounts receivable in blue and her accounts payable in yellow are both fairly low. So it's a nice position. She gets in an even better position in June, where she's got close to $15,000 sitting in her bank account, and her accounts receivable and accounts payable are both nice and low again in that month. But then things start to change. Somewhere after July there, it started to reverse. And the main thing here, it looks like, is that her accounts receivable really started to go up. So she must have had a few clients that asked for payment terms, or maybe you're forgetting to pay her for the time being. And so that started to creep up. And she got up to a point where she had more accounts receivable out there than she had cash on hand, which is not a good place to be. If the money is not in your possession, you can't leverage it. You can't invest it in your business. You can't do anything with it until it's in your possession. So she was bleeding money out of what she had in her cushion there because people weren't paying her. Now it ended up at this point where she had that outstanding $15,000 just kind of sitting there for a couple of months uncollected. And that put her to a point where she had cash on hand that was actually less than what she was owing in her accounts payable that month, which is a bit of a red flag. This is not a good position to be in. Now, of course, she eventually bites the bullet and starts making some phone calls and collects from those clients. So she gets to get that situation back under control. Her accounts receivable start to go down because she's getting this money coming in that she's been owed, which reverses her cash on hand into a good spot again. Now, if she wasn't tracking her numbers, this might look pretty, this might be how it plays out for her. But if she was tracking her numbers, what we hope is that she would get to this point, this last circle, earlier, because this wouldn't be as long because she'd notice it here. So this is what the tool is for. Start watching these lines and see if they're going in directions that are healthy or not. And if they're not, quickly start asking questions. What do I need to dig deeper into? What expert should I call to help me out? Now, there's a lot of ways that you can look into your finances. If you visit atbentrepreneur.com, you'll find all kinds of different guides there on ways that you can interpret your finances. But this tool is designed to help you have a quick and easy way to just track the generalities of things like this, right? 6 numbers, and you can kind of see the trajectory of your business. And again, your business will look very much different than Diane's, but things will play out in a way that you'll start to see trends if you're diligent with using the tool. So that is a crash course in the financial section of the Small Business Pulse Check. And like I said before, remember, think about this as a Fitbit. This isn't the be all end all of understanding the finances of your business, but it's a really good way if you're lacking time and you just don't have the ability to dig into things every month super deeply. You can at least do this and have a pretty good idea of where you stand. Now, like I mentioned before, we can jump into a quick Q&A, and if we have time afterwards, I could introduce you to some of the rest of the tool as well. But for now, let's see if there's any questions on the financial side.
Thanks for walking us through the Pulse Check tool, Cliff. That was awesome. We do have a few questions that have come in. The first one I'm going to address is from Dara, and she's wondering, where can we find industry norm data on gross margins and net margins?
Yeah, there's a few different ways you can go about that. One is you can kind of just Google your industry, and there's probably association information out there. So maybe there's journals or magazines that are part of your industry. A lot of times they'll have that data. You can also go to StatsCan if you really like to dig in for yourself and flounder through a government-run website, which are always, they're not always the smoothest, but the data is there. But a way that I would say to do it that's probably the simplest is to call up or visit the business link, businesslink.ca. They will actually do secondary market research for you. And I believe that they don't actually charge for it anymore. It used to be $140. That might still be the case. I think they're doing it for free now. But I would say go there first. They will probably be able to find that information for you quite quickly for free and without you having to do all the legwork.
Nice, thank you. In your opinion, how often should someone be reviewing their financial data using this tool to stay on top of their financial health?
Yeah, I honestly think if somebody put a couple hours into this every month, and I'd say at the beginning of the month, that's really all it takes. But the trick is to be diligent with it. Don't let a month pass or 2 months pass, because then if you're anything like most humans, it starts to turn into a bigger task. Oh, now I have to go back and input 5 months of data. Not going to bother, right? If you're a busy business person doing your business, it'll get dropped. So I would say monthly, but put it in your calendar. Be incredibly diligent about it. Make it fun if you can. If you need a glass of wine with it, cool, whatever it takes.
Amazing. Thank you. We have another question here from Linda. She's wondering, do you have any suggestions on how to modify the Pulse Check worksheet for professional or service businesses where COGS isn't used?
Yeah, there's a lot of businesses where you might not have COGS, and the more we get into the technical world, the more that comes along. Honestly, I don't think you really have to modify it for that. Just enter zeros, and your cost of goods will just it'll probably zero to 100% there or something like that. But you can just ignore it at that point. Just input zeros, you should be good to go.
Cool, thanks. So let's say someone's historical data is showing consistent losses in a specific area. What do you recommend they do to prioritize improvements and create a plan to turn that around?
So this kind of ties other parts of the plan in as well. So if you're seeing consistent losses, one of the things is you might want to go back and just, I guess, look at the viability of the business plan in the first place. So look at the strategic part of it and the operational part of it. If you're seeing consistent losses, it's likely due to the operating expenses, typically. And if that's the case, it's probably that specific goals haven't been set and specific operational strategies haven't been put in place. And a lot of times an entrepreneur is just kind of spending money on things that they think are going to be a quick fix, right? So go back and look at all of that kind of thing. Have those written goals, and then every expense that comes up, go, is this expense actually going to get me to my goal? Or is this just something I think is a shiny object that I should have because I'm struggling, So if there's consistent losses, it might be a reevaluation of the whole viability and strategy of the business.
Yes. Any tips on how we could use this tool to better forecast for the upcoming year?
Yeah, definitely. That's the nice thing about a tool like this is it marries the past, the actuals with forecasting. So the more you can input your actuals from the past and the longer you've been doing it for, the better your crystal ball is going to be for the future, because these trajectories will start to show patterns, right? So one caveat I'd put on this, if you only use the tool for 3 or 4 months to get started, it's going to be accurate for your past, but it might not be enough data to really make decisions on what you expect for the future. Use the tool for at least 6 months to a year, and you'll start to see that better. But once you do use it that long, if you keep up with it diligently, you will start to see trajectories. And that's where you can go, okay, do I want for my next year, for this trajectory to continue on the way it's going, or do I want it to go a different route? And that's where you can ask the question, for it to go that different route, what is the exact thing within my business that I need to adjust to turn that dial one way or the other? And that's where it'll help with the forecasting.
Very cool. Before I jump to the next one, just a reminder, if anybody has any questions for Cliff, please do pop them into the chat. I think we've covered a lot already, including some of the questions that were asked on registration. So I appreciate it. One of the, and I know you covered this a little bit, but maybe you can talk about it a bit more, but how do you factor in those one-time events or anomalies, like the large unexpected expenses from your historical data when using this tool for forecasting?
Yeah, there's kind of two ways to look at that. So I would say if it's one of the operating expenses, it was, a large investment in your business, you bought some new equipment or something like this, or even an unexpected thing that you had to take care of, I would say leave it in the tool as is, but just make a note so that when you look at it, you can be reminded, this is why my net margin was maybe off that month. So don't take it into consideration as heavily as the other months. If it was cost of goods sold, you kind of have a choice there. You could do the same thing, just leave it in, put a note for yourself. Or if it's fairly clear, like with Diane's example, if she bought 3 months worth of wood, she could break that out through those 3 months just to try to keep the flow of the data a bit more accurate. Now you're not doing that in your actual finances, but as far as the tool for just helping you see where your business is at, it's okay to break it out.
Awesome. So now that we've walked through the tool, if somebody needs support, who should they talk to next?
Well, first stop should be atbentrepreneurscenter.com, of course. there really is. There's a lot of material on that site that if you're starting to see something in the tool that is going off a little bit, you might be able to find a webinar, an article, or another tool that will be able to help you deal with that. But beyond that, it's just, I think it's one of the most important things for business owners is to have a solid network of professionals around them. And that means getting out into your business community and learning who's who in the zoo and partnering up with people that you really trust. So you definitely want an accountant that you trust and has similar values to you so that you can communicate about your business comfortably with them. You probably want somebody on the legal side, maybe not as often, hopefully not as often, but have them in your back pocket. You might want a marketing person on your side for if you realize, you know what, I need more volume, I need to create more revenue. But the best way to do that is just be out in your business community, meeting people, asking people who they trust. An easy way to do this quickly is to get in touch with your local chamber of commerce. Quite often, all the professionals that you'll need will be members of that chamber of commerce. You can become a member as well if you're not already, and you can make those connections quite organically.
Well, that's all we have for questions so far today. Cliff, before we close the session, can you take a moment to walk through the SWOT section of the tool?
Oh, I thought you'd never asked. That's my favorite part. Sure, I'll bring up a slide here that quickly covers the SWOT analysis. So a lot of you might be familiar with this, and this is one of the other parts of the Pulse Check tool in the strategic part. But I honestly think if you keep an updated SWOT analysis going with you as you go through your business and check in on it once a month, you'll be way ahead of anybody that you're competing with because you'll know what's going on. So a SWOT analysis, for those that aren't familiar, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The top half there that you see on the screen, the strengths and weaknesses, these are internal things to you and your company. So what strengths are you bringing to the table as a person? What strengths does your business have? What strengths do your employees or your partners or anybody else who helps you out with your business has? What is being brought to the table that you can capitalize on? On the other side of that, on the internal side, is weaknesses. So again, what are your weaknesses? What are you missing? What is your staff missing? What are any other partners in your business missing? What is your business itself missing? Maybe there's a piece of equipment that you need that you don't have yet. But do an inventory of that. And the first time you do a SWOT analysis, spend some time on this. Take a half a day and really, really dig in. Do a thorough analysis of where you and your business stand and get those strengths and weaknesses laid out in a chart like this one. After you do that, flip down to the bottom, you've got your opportunities and your threats. So this is similar, but you're looking externally now. So what opportunities exist in the market that you're in the community that you're in, amongst your competition? Maybe there's somebody that you compete with that's having a rough time. That's an opportunity for you, right? Again, do an inventory of that and then switch over to the threats. Again, looking externally, what's out there in the market that might be a trick for you to get through. Maybe there's a new competitor that came into your market who's quite large and threatens to take a part of your market share. Maybe there's some change in regulations or in laws that affect your industry. That could go under opportunities or threats depending on what it happens to be. But again, do a thorough inventory of these. Take that half a day, make this chart, a full representation of what your business has at its disposal and what's up against. But then when you do that pulse check every month, after you finish the financial part, come to this SWOT analysis and just kind of look through it and go, what has changed? Have I addressed any threats that were out there? And maybe I've turned them into opportunities. Or maybe I have a weakness, but there's an opportunity to fix that weakness. Maybe I can use one of my strengths to get rid of one of the threats. The way I like to think about this is, again, with an analogy, and this is actually a real person though. If you Google a guy named Hellboy who is in arm wrestling competitions, I think he's a living example of what a SWOT analysis can do. He's a smaller man, so he's probably, I don't know, maybe 130 pounds, but he competes in arm wrestling, and his strength is that he's got his right arm starting at his shoulder all the way down, looks like it belongs to about a 250-pound bodybuilder. It's really strange, but this was something that he had from birth, and I think he had a choice basically when he was young. Like, what do I do? He wanted to get into arm wrestling, but his choice was, do I address my weakness, which is the rest of my body is quite small, and try to bulk up to match this giant super arm, or do I capitalize on the super arm and you just kind of let this weakness be not even a weakness anymore, but just a neutrality? And that's what he decided to do. He beefed up that giant right arm. So now he's arm wrestling people in the 130-pound category with a 250-pound bodybuilder arm. And so he wins a lot. But these are the kind of things that you can do with your business. If you do a good SWOT analysis, you can start to go, okay, what strengths do I have? What weaknesses do I have? Is it better to capitalize on my strengths or fix some of these weaknesses? Maybe this weakness won't really affect me. Maybe I can turn it into a strength. This kind of thing. So I would really encourage you to spend that time, build a good SWOT analysis, and then each month revisit it and just see where those lines can be drawn and where you're at, and make decisions from there. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much, Cliff. And that was a great example of a good SWOT analysis. I think you've got us all laughing to end the day. I appreciate that. So as we wrap up, I'd like to extend a sincere thank you to Cliff for sharing his expertise on the Financial Pulse Check tool and helping us gain a clearer understanding of our financial health today. Cliff, your insights and practical tips will undoubtedly guide us as we assess and plan for the year ahead. And to everyone who joined us today, thank you for being part of this session and for your commitment to strengthening your business's financial foundation. We hope you walk away with the confidence to make informed decisions and to take meaningful steps towards success in 2025. Don't forget, part 2 of this series, Forecasting and Financial Planning for 2025, is coming up on December 5th. We'll dive a bit deeper into how to forecast revenue and set realistic financial goals for the upcoming year. We've also just launched our virtual Economic Insights for Small Businesses session. This is a great chance to dig in to learn about some of the common challenges and opportunities facing business owners as you plan for 2025. So don't miss that one on November 27th. And of course, for the full lineup of events and additional resources to support you along your journey, visit atbentrepreneurscenter.com, where you'll find a wealth of helpful tools and information. That's all for today. Until next time, folks, have a great rest of your Thursday.